Zombies have been devouring our brains and our culture for centuries. Hi, I'm Rebecca of Rad Notes Book Coaching, and today we're going to talk about how you can include zombies in your speculative fiction stories. But before we do that, let's get a little background of where zombies come from and why they are. So, back in ancient Greece, some archaeologists discovered some zombie tombs. So they say. So, what they did is they unearthed these tombs to discover that some of the skeletons were actually pinned down by really large rocks and heavy objects. And for whatever reason, why they think this, they assumed that they were preventing the dead bodies from reanimating. Because why wouldn't you think that of ancient Greece? Now, I'm not a scientist in academia, but I do study a lot of history and weird things. So I'm not going to completely agree with these archaeologists. I'm going to tell you just a super quick story about a man named Giles Corey in Salem in 1692. He was accused of witchery, like so many people were. Now, in Massachusetts law, if you entered a plea, guilty or not guilty, and still found guilty, the state took your land. So if you look at a little bit of history of all the people that were charged with witchery, you're going to see it was a really beautiful plot of land that the state acquired. Anyway, so Giles over here, he refused to enter a plea knowing this. So he had to undergo this torture treatment in which his body was crushed slowly by huge boulders, big rocks, people jumping on it because they thought it was fun, the basics of humanity, until his death. It took 3 days for this guy to die. But he kind of won because his sons inherited his land as opposed to the state. It just took 3 days to do it. Ooh. But that's a story within itself. Now, zombies that we kind of know and love in our current pop culture references back to Haiti, starting in the 17th century. Now, unfortunately, this is the time that South Africans were brought to the island to work as slaves on the sugarcane plantations. And it's said that their living conditions were so horrific, their physiques and mental states actually represent what we think of zombies today. Um, Also, not a very pretty sight of the history of zombies. Could be fiction, nonfiction, but it's there. Um, what else happened in Haiti, and just so you understand, is those South Africans brought the religion of voodoo with them. And that voodoo, it may not be what humanity agrees with, but we're not judging. What we're doing is we're just gonna I'm not going to break down what voodooism is. But I do want to tell you that most voodoo practitioners don't believe in zombies. Why? Because a lot of those practitioners create zombies. Now you have a story, right? So there's these priests or priestesses called bokers, Bokors. And what they do is they mix herbs and shells and fish and animal parts and bone, whatever they do. Again, I'm not judging, but they mix this thing all together and it creates this potion called a zombie powder. Now, once this zombie powder is perfectly mixed, it contains a chemical called tetrodotoxin. And this has a lot of side effects because when we look at zombies, it's all about the brain going crazy and eating people, right? So this zombie potion makes it so people have difficulty walking. You see, how zombie drags their leg. They have mental confusion. They eat brains. They have respiratory problems. Well, they can't talk or anything, and they're always grunting and sound like they're having a hard time with their, dragging their foot and walking. So they basically make life a living hell for these people. And a really great movie that really shows the depth of what these bokers can do to the human mind. It was back in 1988, a movie called The Serpent and the Rainbow, starred Bill Pullman. Great flick. Check it out if you want to. But this leads to that zombie apocalypse is real. You can laugh at me all you want to, but a zombie apocalypse is real because it's based on the concept that these chemicals can affect the brain and make you do crazy stuff. So, for instance, there was a gentleman back in, a gentleman I'm saying loosely, a Florida guy back in 2012. He sniffed or ate some bath salts. I'm using quotations because that's what they did in the articles, which makes me think it was something else, but this is all they've given me. And the concept is that it made him so hot. His blood pressure jumped so high. He freaked out. He ripped off all his clothes. He jumps on a homeless guy and starts eating his face, zombie like, right? And all because he had these chemical changes in his brain. There's concepts in that are found in the natural animal kingdom where parasites, fungi, and bacteria create zombie-like attributes in insects. Where zombie ants will go to the top of plants and will starve to death while this fungus eats its brain and spreads, and its spores do oozing things. I don't even know what they do, but you know what? That's all part of a story too. I mean, there's zombie spiders, there's zombie wasps, there's zombie plants, all because of these bacterias or parasites or uh, fungi. So it's real. The zombie apocalypse. So let's really start looking into the concepts of how you can use these zombies in your stories. Perfect example. His name is Max Brooks, and he studies in diseases like the Black Plague, influenza, and AIDS. And he saw that the societal response to this is cyclical. So what he did is he takes all this factual information and he made a New York Times bestseller called World War Z. You might have heard of the movie. But his book was published in 2006. So it's based on, again, it's based on factual information about how a virus escapes, it spreads rapidly, and how it changes human society. The basis of the book is based on disease, changing the brain structure so they do crazy things. This book was so realistic that Max Brooks actually spent a lot of time at West Point training top ranked officers in the United States military of how to respond to pandemics that can paralyze a nation. I'm going to keep going how a zombie apocalypse is real. Is that the United States Department of Health and Human Services, or the CDC, actually has a website that you can, it's called let me tell you what it's called. It's called Don't Be a Zombie, Be Prepared. I'm going to put this in the comments down below so you can check out the links for yourself. But this is what it's based on. The concept that if you're prepared for a zombie apocalypse, then you're prepared for other disasters like hurricanes and other pandemics and earthquakes and terror attacks. So the government knows that this is a realistic concept. Now, how are we going to put this into your stories? Well, zombies, as we know, they're like a human flesh-eating nemesis, right? But let's look at them from a symbolic point of view. They represent human fear, survival, and the primal instincts that test us in extreme conditions. They're a reflection of societal mirrors that focus on our insatiable appetite for consumerism, personal identity struggles, and societal collapse. That could be due to uncontrolled technology. You know, these viruses are made in labs. That's type of technology. Zombies symbolize the ugliness of humans. So think about rotting flesh that emits this unforgettable stench. They have no pulse. They have no ability to speak. Does that sound like a puppet? That maybe these puppets are craving human brains. There's another symbol, is that a brain symbolizes intelligence. So therefore, it represents a system of mindlessness manipulated by a master puppeteer, right? So what a great way to look into how they can act in your stories. Other fantastic tales are, let me say that zombies have not just been in horror like World War Z, but there's humor. Shaun of the Dead, that was an awesome movie. Dystopian series, Walking Dead. there's a romance. There's plenty of zombie romance. One of my favorite movies was called Warm Bodies, where these there's a group of people that hide into, you have to have your leaders and your followers. So when the zombie apocalypse happened, they created an encampment to keep out the zombies. Well, what you found is that some of these zombies, they couldn't change them back. But then there's a group of zombies that all they needed to find was their humanity again, and it brought them back to life. Now think about that. In this story, there's a transition of the main character found himself as a human form again. They're changed forever because once you start eating people, I don't think it kind of changes you a little bit, right? So they're changed and they're different. Um, so they're part of a transition, but also, and more importantly, I think is the people who are in the encampment who are fighting everything because they were just so focused on survival, is they started to see and that there is a difference in humanity, and it was a virus, and it was not controlled properly. So think about these different situations when you are bringing your zombie to life and all the different possibilities about the symbolism and how it relates to your story. Thanks for listening. Happy writing. Peace.